I hear everything one way, even though they say I don't pay attention. I do everything the same as the way I did it last time. Still you see my life is pitiful, that I'm selfish and predictable. Though I have no voice to disagree, I don't wanna change. Give me time to think. The one that you hated.
Hello, everybody. It is Sunday morning, and we are kicking up another episode of Morning Dad Talk. I appreciate all the voicemails we've got this week, guys, and I encourage you to please keep calling us. If you would like to talk to us, 762-441-0281. Again, that's 762-441-0281. We got a special guest on the show today. I met him when I was down in Dallas last time, and he has been fighting hard against this system. And I want you to welcome him to the show this morning, Mr. Dr. Brooks Kinsey. I said, Mr. Dr. Brooks McKenzie. But how you doing, Brooks?
Fat, old, living the dream.
Hey, you were calling us old yesterday.
So y'all saw that, huh?
I saw it. Yeah, I pay attention.
Well, there you go. Just checking. Yeah, it's like a whole stream of like old septuagenarians coming on here, just kind of coming through. And back in the day when I was a boy.
I got you, man. Brooks, tell everybody about yourself, what you do, and what you've been doing to fight this system and what got you involved. All that.
I don't do anything. So my background is I've got a master's in clinical psychology, so that's psychopathology, borderline schizophrenia, mental illness. My PhD is developmental and experimental psychology. So experimental means I'm a researcher. I'm not a therapist or a counselor. And developmental is from the time the sperm inseminates the egg to the day you die. But my specialization is children and families. So at-risk children and families, how we keep them healthy, how we repair damage, how we prevent damage. But that parent-child relationship is my specialization. And I used to be the assistant director of research at the TCU Institute of Child Development. So I'm a researcher, worked at a university. I left there, started doing consulting for nonprofits around the state of Texas that serve post-adopt, foster care children. So the most damaged children in our state. I've trained organizations, families, counselors, judges, attorneys, and I did that for many years. And tried to change the system from within the system because it is so utterly broken. And Texas is one of the worst states in the nation, and we're repeatedly recognized as that. We're nationally renowned for being pitiful in how we deal with our children and families. And so within the system, I was trying to change it. And it wasn't until I went through this stuff that is the reason for your show and a lot of other things that I saw how utterly rigged the system actually is, and that it's not a mistake that we're destroying kids like this. It's actually intentional and working as intended. And
I was going to ask, how is it different for you, the way you look at this system? I mean, before you were doing the research and stuff about it, but then you find yourself going into it. What was the difference like before and after? What are some of the things you learned once you got personal experience?
So before, when I didn't know how deep, so 10 years ago, I would have thought that I was crazy, that you needed tinfoil on my head, and I was a conspiracy theorist, and all this nutty stuff. But even then, working within the system, it was unbelievable how broken it was. I mean, there's some basic stuff that we just know. Um, so like we know cigarettes are bad for you, and full disclosure, I'm a closet smoker, so smokers don't get all bent. But I know they're bad for me. There's no way in the world that they're good for me. Now, will I get cancer? So I have an exponential rate of getting cancer because I smoke, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to. But it we definitely know I am damaging my body. I'm not going to smoke and get better, we know that there's going to be some damage, right? So we know that. And if you think about on the smoking aspect, it wasn't until 1990 that a federal court found that cigarettes probably cause cancer, but they fought that battle for 20 years in the courts, saying they didn't. The tobacco companies saying, well, no, they don't. And then they finally lost the lawsuit and people started suing them. Then they turned right back around and said, you idiots, everybody knows smoking causes cancer, right? And so we kind of have the same thing here, that we have over 50 years of research on what a healthy child and family looks like. And when you break that or tamper with it, what happens to the children every time? Are they all going to be school shooters? No. Are they all going to commit suicide? No. But we know that there's always damage, just like there's always damage with smoking. Yet we have that same kind of battle where the legislators and the people who profit from this are, oh, nothing to see here. No, we don't know what you're talking about. No, that's not real. And they're fighting it and fighting it, just like the tobacco companies fought responsibility for cigarettes. We have an industry that is so entrenched in fighting to continuing damaging children and families because it is so effing profitable.
Absolutely, man. Guys, stick around because I tell you what, we're going to get into a conversation. Me and Brooks got to talk a little bit on the phone yesterday, and I told him before we got on here, I was like, we hear about the attorneys, we hear about the politicians. We need to talk about these crooked experts out there. And I definitely think that is a huge topic because a lot of people think that this is the magic answer for their case. And then they find out they just go and spend all their money on something that was completely useless. And we're going to get to your voicemails. That's going to be the second half of the show. I got the number down there if you want to call in and leave us a voicemail. And thank you. You got somebody that specifically wants to talk to you this morning, Brooks. But you say you're a researcher. There's a lot of the fatherless statistics and stuff out there. Many people know a lot of the common ones. What is some of the research that you've seen that might not be as known out in society right now?
So a lot of the stuff, it's been verified over and over and over again, and people will argue, and it's silly because, so I'm going to preface this. So most research institutes are either universities or a research institute, like I used to work at a university, or it comes from the government. Health and Human Services, Centers for Disease Control. And depending on what they're saying, it can be very politically motivated, right? I
Right.
don't want to go into the whole COVID thing too much, but we saw some stuff that the CDC said at one point, and then a year or two later they're saying the complete opposite. It's like, how does your research change in 2 years? And so you kind of have to look, because people are always go, well, studies say, there's studies that say we didn't land a man on the moon. There's studies that say that, Martians killed Kennedy. You can find a study that says anything. And so what you have to do is look at, if I have 10,000 studies that say, uh, this pallet of bricks weighs 1,000 pounds, and then I have one study that says it weighs 10 pounds, I'm probably going to go with the other that goes across years. So what we know from the fatherlessness is the is girls, 6 times more likely to be teen single mothers. Um, we have all that stuff, the mental health, the mental illness, the poverty, declines in every area of life. 60% of all rapists who are in prison, so the ones we've caught, come from fatherless homes. So, um, about 70 to 80% of men in prison, fatherless homes and foster care and those types. So it the argument for a lot of this stuff is, oh, kids are resilient, they get over it. Well, we know it depends on how you're defining resiliency. Does it kill them right off? No, but does it affect them across the lifespan? Absolutely. And you can trace all that back, but you get into other stuff that most people don't think about. So there's a lot of studies out there, and a lot of this stuff isn't done anymore because it's not politically correct. So we're trying to justify the abnormal family, not a man, not a woman, biologically continuously married. Let's marry someone to a goat and say that that's just as good, and we know it's not. So we don't do a lot of this research anymore because you can't get funded for it because it's not PC.
Right.
What we know from decades is little boys learn how to be husbands by watching their father.
Yep.
Boys learn to be men by watching their father. And so if you don't have one, you don't learn that skill set. But we also know that little girls, and this is very simplified, grow up and look for a person like their father, because when children are young, they watch that relationship, and that's how they learn how to have that relationship as an adult. They emulate, well, I did better, I did, yeah. But when you really dive deep, the vast majority of us, we emulate that relationship that we saw, and that's why
Right.
children divorce are much more likely to get divorced and go through this exact same thing. um, and and so there's so much, and it's so many layers that go into it, but it's never talked about, because when you talk about those things, you're literally admitting that you're destroying children, and nobody wants to bring that up, because in one case you're going to isolate half of your audience because about half your audience filed for divorce and screwed their kids over. And then I don't want to hear all the what about. Yeah, we're not talking. Most people that get divorced don't have severe abuse and neglect. They're just not happy, and they put their own happiness over the needs of their child. And so it's across all spectrums.
I know you said no what abouts, but I got a what about here. But I raised a boy that didn't become a rapist. I raised a girl that didn't become pregnant as a teen. What do you say to that, Brooks? Because that is going to be the question that is always
And
put out there.
and you'll notice that I when I speak, I will address all of these while I'm speak. So when I
Yeah,
talked about cigarettes, it doesn't mean I'm going to get cancer, but it does mean I've damaged my lungs, my esophagus, my mouth, my tongue, my lips, my cardiovascular system. I've made. So does it mean I'm going to get cancer and have a heart attack or a stroke in the next year because I'm a smoker?
yeah,
No. But it doesn't mean that I've definitely damaged myself. Absolutely. So I can say, well, look at me, I'm healthy, but if I didn't smoke, I would be healthier. I would be exponentially healthier. So all that what about stuff, it's usually just a justification to justify. And so I'm a researcher, but I'm also a Christian. So people tend to want to justify their sin. Well, and if you're not a believer, that's fine. People want to justify their poor decisions. And well, my case is different. Mine is this. Well, and we've redefined the term abuse to you hurt my feelings. That's abuse. I need to get out of this marriage. And it's like, no, you need to put your big girl, your big boy pants on, work it out, and put your child's needs over your selfish wants. In most cases, there are some cases of abuse, and so a
absolutely.
lot of people will say, well, I came from a broken family and I'm a CEO and da da da, and it's like, that's fantastic, but you're looking at certain things to justify that.
Yeah,
Had you come from an intact family, you may have worked at a gas station your whole life and whatever, but your relationship with your children and your spouse would be so much better because that's what you would have learned. And so
right.
people, it's called observer bias. I go find things that justify my opinion. I don't base my opinion off of facts. And so a lot of people go out and pick those things out to put it into their schema so that they can justify what they believe, and they ignore all the stuff that refutes it.
Yeah, and it's if you speak about dads, well, there are some deadbeat dads out there. There are dads that don't need their children. They don't do that when you talk about the other side. But I don't know what it is about this issue when we talk about family court or fatherlessness. It's like they are trying to find a way to not listen to what you're saying when you're presenting the research. I mean, have you found some ways that makes it a little bit more palatable for somebody that has really never heard the research or that's hearing it for the first time? Not that we
So
should have to.
so So I'm not good at a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I joked that I would have made a great Hitler because Hitler didn't have a lot of skills. He pretty much failed at everything he ever tried. And I'm not glorifying him, but he was an incredible orator, right?
Absolutely.
He could move crowds and sway their opinions and do all this other stuff. And if you ever go to speaking events or whatever, you'll know that person when you see him and be like, dude, was he the whole room? I mean, it's like it's a skill.
Yeah.
And so I have a little bit of that, but I also have the research background. So I'm not giving you my opinion on stuff. I'm presenting stuff that if you want to argue about it, you need to go argue with the 2000 researchers before me because I'm not giving you my stuff. I'm giving you their stuff going back to back to the 60s in some cases. So if you want to argue with that, go argue with that. But I present it in a way, it's like this is just the way it is. And I'm more than happy to read your stuff and show you where it's wrong because it usually is. Because I can set up a research study to show anything. And one of the things that I often talk about is so a lot of research is done on funding. So in the what was it? And I'm old, so I get confused. So in the 90s, everything was ADD and ADHD, right? That's
Yeah.
when that. And it's funny that we didn't actually have those diagnoses until pharmaceutical companies developed a medicine to treat a diagnosis that didn't exist. So they created a diagnosis for a medicine. It's funny how this works. Anyway, so, but that's where all the money was. So all these people who didn't know anything about ADD, ADHD, or clinical psychology jumped into that. And then after that, it was autism. That was the sexy thing. Then everybody switched to because that's where you could get the money. But
Okay.
the research that I talk about, nobody was funding this. This was done by academics across years because they actually wanted to know the truth. Research today has turned into an awful hot mess of just bought and paid for results. But a lot of this research that was done at universities, which are notoriously liberal. And being notoriously liberal, they don't have traditional values, traditional family values. A lot of this was done in the middle of the bring home the bacon fried up a pan. You don't need a husband kind of garbage. And so they were literally proving the point of the traditional family while working in places that hated the traditional family for the most part. But when you present the facts and the data and the evidence, you're always going to have someone that argues. And my response is simply show it to me. I'll be more than happy to sit down and look at it with you. And that never happens. And then when people want to argue, I always make an offer when I go speak. I will debate any lawyer, any judge, any expert witness who thinks I'm a fraud. My only requirement is that we sit down, it be video recorded, and we sign releases before we start, and we both have freedom to use it how we want after that. And I've to date yet had anybody take me up on that.
It's so hard to have conversations nowadays because people aren't willing to really learn anything new. I try to watch myself. There's been several times since I've started this show that I've said something and I go back later on and I'm like, that wasn't right. Or somebody teaches me so I want to learn, especially guys like you. But that's just seems to be a lost art. And I don't understand it. But I do want to get on stuff. I thought that was really interesting, though, about the ADD and ADHD. That wasn't a diagnosis until the medicine came out.
No, so there's a book. I've got it here somewhere. I don't know. It's in this room somewhere. The DSM. There's a bunch of different, DSM-4, DSM-5, DSM-5.
Right.
It's where that's so the whole area of psychiatry and psychology is a mess. So that's where the diagnoses come from, right? The book itself is written predominantly by psychiatrists and medical doctors, right? But neither of them are trained in psychology. so, so they're writing the psychological diagnosis with very limited understanding of psychology in general. Anyway, it's a whole messy thing. But there's been a diagnosis in there forever called anxiety disorder NOS, not otherwise specified. Well, ADD and ADHD are that thing renamed specifically so pharmaceutical companies could market their medicine to it. So first you came out with ADD, right?
Yeah.
And the ADD drugs came out, and then all of a sudden there's ADHD, and it just so happened to coincide with a new round of drugs that came out. And one of the things that we know about the field of psychology and psychopharmacology is that almost everybody and their brother is on some kind of meds right now. We know that they were developed to be short term.
Yep.
We know that when you take them for years on end, like a lot of people do, they actually change the physical shape of your brain. They change it. We also know that people that say take an SSRI or say I'm taking whatever that makes me feel better. Well, when they come out with a new whatever that makes me feel better, studies have shown repeatedly, and these are studies done by the pharmacological companies, that the old medicine all of a sudden stops working as well. And then the new medicine, and so does it really stop? And so there's all the placebo effects and all these other kind of stuff. But think of like Adderall and Ritalin and all this other stuff. These are hardcore drugs, and some of these things are methamphetamine salts. So grad students crush them up and snort them to stay up all night and study, because it's basically speed, yet we're giving them to 7-year-olds. It's illegal to test them on children, but it's not illegal for a doctor with no background in psychology to write a prescription and give them to children. So we can't test them on kids because it's illegal, but we can write them prescriptions based on, a parent coming in saying they're just too much to handle. Okay, well, here's some drugs. Well, how about you go out and play ball with them and wear them out? But, that's old school, and that would require me getting off my butt and going outside and throwing the ball with my kid.
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of similar to the family courts, though? The incentives that is fueled fatherlessness, Section 8 or Title 4D. When you're looking at the pharmaceuticals, I guess you look at the drug reps kind of like lobbyists. Hey,
good Lord.
It's very similar. If we put incentives there where there's money, there's going to be corruption. And I think I've always said, I know everybody knows about the narco wars and Pablo Escobar and stuff. And we have the same thing here in America. It's called Big Pharma. It's just disguised under the legal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, and so just look at the COVID stuff. Wherever you stand on that, everybody should get vaccinated. Nobody should get vaccinated, whatever. One, we don't know what it's going to do. And I'm not a big anti-vaxxer. I'm just we don't know what it's going to do. The kids that they're giving it to now are the test subjects for what happens when you give it to kids. Right. A couple of years ago, you only need a vaccine and you're good. Okay, well, you need 2. And now they're talking, you need 1 every 6 months. And when they rolled this out, of course they have lobbyists, because there are hundreds of billions of dollars to be made if you have someone doing this every 6 months or a year, right, for the rest of their life. But they have immunity. They have immunity from all negative effects. And that's very similar to our court system. Anybody who steps in that courtroom and is getting a paycheck has immunity from the negative effects of what they do. And so Big Pharma came in, locked it in. We got immunity. So say in 5 years, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but say all of a sudden we all start getting weird brain cancers and all of our children are sterile or they grow third eyes in their forehead. Who knows? You can't sue the pharmaceutical companies, because when they rolled this out, they lobbied the legislators for immunity. So there's nothing. You won't get anything. You're done. And that's how our courts and our expert witnesses and attorneys also have that same thing. So, the Stump v. Sparkman case, where immunity comes out for judges, is absolutely horrendous. And when people hear it, they're like, that can't be real. And it's like, no, that is where it started, because these scumbags thought that they should be able to break the law and destroy people's lives because they need that ability to do their jobs.
Yeah. Dude, and you bring up a good point, and I guess this is a good time to get into it, guys. We'll be getting to your voicemails in a second. We're going to go a lot deeper into it, but I just want to get a quick, short answer. What's the first thing that pops in your head when you hear of divorce or parental alienation experts?
I assume that they're lying, making stuff up, and trying to sell a product, whether it's themselves or a DVD set or a book or a program or whatever.
Why would they do that? Well, and that's an obvious answer, but explain this, because I think so many people in this community, they have came up with the perfect product, in this corrupt industry, right? Parents are going to pay if that's what they got to do to see their kids. And so then they get these experts to say, I can come in and show them what's going on in your case. And these are desperate parents. They're looking for help anywhere they can get it. Feel like the attorney's not helping. Maybe if I get this expert in there, they're going to help on the case.
Yeah, surely they will see, surely they will understand. Exactly. So the benefit of being an appointed, so I've never been appointed by anybody, and I probably never will be. So I started serving as an expert witness in custody cases back in 2013 when I left TCU. So, when I left the academic world, that's when I first started doing this, because what I had seen is that while I was at TCU, we were actually doing what we call judicial summits. So like every other year, judges could come in and get their continuing education credits, because we knew that these judges were making not life and death, but some of the most important decisions for children that'll ever happen, and they were blowing it all the time. So we tried educating hundreds and hundreds of judges and attorneys and all this, and it didn't do anything. They just didn't care. They honestly didn't care. And so I started being an expert witness in about 2013, and I've probably done more free stuff than whatever. But nobody in that courtroom is telling the truth when it comes to child welfare, to what's best for the best interest of the child is not defined. But the thing is there's so much money, right, for attorneys, judges, if you really get into that. But if you are a court appointed expert, most court appointed experts, they get a great proportion, 60, 70, 80% of their business from these courts running these cases through, right?
Yeah.
And so a child custody evaluation is actually junk. It means nothing, because what they do actually has nothing to do with parenting. It's just the counseling lobbied to have this stuff put in, and so in our state, in the Texas Family Code. So our counselors have a lobby, and they lobbied for this stuff to basically corner the market for the most part. But it doesn't have anything to do with whether you're a good parent or a bad parent. It's just a bunch of stuff that means nothing, and then they come in and they present it that way. And what I've seen is that most experts don't know anything about child development. They don't know anything about attachment. And so attachment is the basis of that parent-child relationship. It is the thing that dictates more so than almost anything else in the world how you're going to turn out. We know that children who have a bad attachment disruption, things like that, actually have more physical health problems than kids that come from intact homes and smoke and drink. So literally smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol is better for you than coming from a broken family or having that relationship taken out. And it's not like there isn't research. So here's an amazing book I have that I keep on my desk, right? And it's about, I don't know, 3.5, 4 inches thick.
Who's the author on that, Brooks?
This is Jude Cassidy and Philip Shaver. But this isn't theirs. This is I don't know, 50 years of research on the parent-child relationship. So when people want to talk to me about research and they show me an article, I go, great, here's mine. What do you want to know? Because it is so well documented. But when you go into these courtrooms, these experts, one, they didn't measure the parent-child relationship, and there's a way to do that. There's actually a scientific measure that allows you to do it, and they never do it because it's a high-end measure. Most of them are trained. So they'll come in and they talk about, I feel this, or they'll give this philosophical and theoretical framework that has no basis in science. It's just what they believe. But it's extremely lucrative. So a child custody evaluation should cost you about $1,500. All right, I'm working with a man out of Central Texas that's been charged $60,000 so far.
Somebody charge more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the work that was done can be done in less than a week.
Yeah.
So they basically charge them $60,000 for a week's worth of work, and work that doesn't really have anything to do with it. And then when I read the report, it is antithetical It is the exact opposite of everything that we know from research. So it's literally, back to my cigarette analogy, because I think it helps people get a lock on it. She literally wrote a paper saying cigarettes are good. We're going to let this child smoke 2 packs a day because, and there has been research that came out that shows that cigarettes stave off dementia and some other things. I won't get into all that, but it's not the cigarettes, it's the nicotine. So that we should let this child smoke 2 packs a day so they don't get dementia and they do better and blah 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 blah, which is one of the most ridiculous things you'll ever hear, right? That would be, if someone said that in a courtroom today, we would be like, you are so effing stupid. Yet they say the same kind of stuff when it comes to the parent-child relationship. This parent should not have access because they haven't learned this or they don't do this, and there's no evidence for that. There's none at all. If there's not overt abuse and neglect, the child always benefits from that relationship. And when you sever it, damage it, tamper with it, they always suffer. That's just fact, just like cigarettes damage us. But these clown experts come in, they figure out what needs to be said, and they're often repeatedly pulled up by the same judge in the same law firm, and they are brought in to say what that judge and law firm wants. Because if I'm an expert and I come in and tell the judge you're a moron and what you've done amounts to child abuse and you've damaged that child irreparably over the next years and you need to fix that, I will never ever get called back into that case. So that's not what these experts do. They come in and say, what do you want me to say? And they find a way to say it, assuming nobody else in that room is going to have any inkling of anything about psychology.
You know, that brings up a memory. This was a couple of years ago. We had released a video where we called one of the custody evaluators. The custody evaluator had came to one of the father's home, and he didn't know he had like a Ring camera, so he was being recorded. But he had I guess like a nanny there, and the nanny came out and answered the door. Well, he's sitting there talking to the nanny, saying, "I feel so sorry for the dad. His ex is a black widow, sex addict. She alienates him from the kids. She's playing all these different tricks." He's like, "I've been trying. And, you know, she really doesn't need to have the kids." All this stuff, man. And this guy did 3 custody evaluations. How many evaluations do you need? I think he spent close to $100,000. The father did for this guy. Well, he had all that on tape of this guy telling all this stuff. When it goes to court, he starts saying, "Oh, dad's this, the complete opposite." Because maybe now I can get another custody evaluation. And he just kept sending this guy bills nonstop. But it just shows you how crooked this thing is. Guys, we could get into this type of stuff all day. I don't think, I know a lot of the viewers hear us talking about the corruption that goes on inside a family court, but I don't know, Brooks, that they know how deep it really goes between politics, the family court, the experts, the whole 9 yards. They're all in each other's back pockets. You've talked to a lot of legislators, so you'll probably be able to, relate to me on this. Been doing it for 3 years. I used to be a little bit nicer than I am now, but I remember this past year I was at CPAC. I was kind of fed up with it because politicians tell you everything you want to hear, and then they hardly ever do anything to back it up. And there's a common answer that I get all the time when I talk to these guys, and they'll say, "You know what you need to do? You need to get the judges together, sit down, and educate them on what's going on." And that's when I looked at this senator and I said, "So let me get this straight. You're telling me a guy who just wants to be a father, I didn't go to law school, that this guy that went to college for 7 years to get this job that works in it every single day and sees the effects of it, that I got to go educate him, and you're expecting him to listen?" He was so tongue-tied. And he was like, "Well, or you can keep doing what you're doing right now. This helps too." But I was like, I'm so sick of them telling us to tell these judges and how to educate them. They know what's going on, Brooks. Would you not agree?
Well, yes and no. So some of them just are ignorant. So, and you can go, and people can go on YouTube and look up. And so this is for Texas. So a lot of what I talk about is Texas centric. So the Texas has a Supreme Court Advisory Committee. that meets every year, I think. Anyway, in 2020 they met. So there's like, it's during COVID, and there's about 15 of them on the screen. They're high-powered attorneys, ex-judges. So this is the committee that advises the Supreme Court on different issues, right? So
Right.
and you can pull it up still, 2020, Texas Supreme Court Advisory Committee. In that, they openly talk about judges being bought off by law firms, that they need to do something about campaign funding, and some of them again are ex-judges come right out and say, no, I know we know that they buy rulings, we know that judges are in law firms pockets, and they're openly talking about it. They also talk about the pitiful requirements to become a judge. So it was, all you had to be as a lawyer for 4 years and not be convicted of anything serious. You didn't even have to have ever been in a trial, argue a trial, and you could be a sitting judge ruling over trials. And they talk about how a lot of the judges simply don't even know the law because they haven't practiced as attorneys long enough. And so that Texas is full of incompetent judges. And so do some of them know? No, some of them are just idiots. And when we talked earlier again about that observer bias, so Judge Mary Brown in Dallas, the one who wants, James Younger's penis to be cut off, how do you educate someone who thinks it's okay to chop off the penis of a minor child? There is no education. That is just evil, right? And so you can't educate evil out of people. You can't educate ignorance out of people because they are in a system that benefits them. And I liken it to abortionists or pedophiles. Pedophiles is good. I like to use pedophiles. So child abuse is child abuse. And in Texas, what our courts do meet the legal definition of child abuse. So they're committing child abuse. What the attorneys argue for meet the legal definition of child abuse. So they're committing child abuse, and pedophilia is a child abuse. So if I'm running a daycare full of pedophiles and we're diddling little kids, do I bring in a non-pedophile as a director or to work there? Or do I bring in someone who knows how the game is played, right? So I'm going to hire someone who I vetted to make sure they're a pedophile too. I'm not going to bring in, some child advocate who's going to end up turning us all into the sheriff's department or the FBI. So this system doesn't, you're not going to find people who don't know what's going on. And I don't care if you have an R or a D next to your name, or you call yourself, we've got a bunch of Christian conservative judges down here that do vile stuff to children, and you can educate them all day long, but that's how they make their money. And that's how they're going to politically advance. And that's how they're going to get on the appellate bench. And that's how they pay for their lake house. And so it's kind of like working at an abortion clinic, because again, I don't believe abortion, I believe it's murder. It's like working at an abortion clinic, coming out and saying, praise Jesus, but this is just how it's legal. So this is how I make my money. And it's this thing that what they say and what they do are two different things, because every judge will tell you, oh no, best interest of the child. And it's so complicated. And each case is so complex. But it's funny how I've reviewed so many cases where it was literally cut and paste from another document, but the attorney didn't do find replace properly. And it's got other people's names in it. And so if it's so different, how are you copying paste? And but it's not different. It is the exact same paradigm. They just want it to appear complicated, so it's job security. But educating these judges, I'd say I've educated hundreds of them over the years, and I've met two who actually came up and said, I've been destroying kids and I've got to change. I cannot believe I've been doing this. I've been going off of what all these other experts and these attorneys and all these people told me, and I've actually destroyed kids for 20 years. All the rest of them are like, yeah, but I know best. And it's like, yeah, you're not a neurosurgeon. Why would I let you cut my head open to work with my brain? You don't know anything about psychology, yet you're cutting these children's heads open, metaphorically, and messing with their brains. And that's the thing. Most of these judges don't care because this is where they make their living. And most of these judges who are family court judges, they were the scumbag attorney before they got elected to be the scumbag judge. So they were playing this game for years, making money off the destruction of the family and children before they ever became a judge. And is a black dress all of a sudden going to give them ethics and morals? Hell no. They just now have absolute immunity from anything they do.
I mean, and that's disappointing. And there's a little hope in there because you said at least two judges that listened. That's some of the hardest things I think doing this with the advocacy is feeling like nobody listens. They just don't listen. And then the only time we have people that really try to comprehend are the ones that are going through it. I really do not have much faith left in this system, Brooks. I got to tell you. It's talking about that. I mentioned it several times this week on the show, guys. But for anybody that's tuning in that hadn't heard it, I think it was last week. Georgia had their child support commission hearing, and it was a bunch of judges on there. And the lady, one of the judges, was telling them we got to stop deviating and doing adjustments for child support. We're at around 70%. We're not supposed to be anywhere near that because we are about to lose our federal funding. She was telling these judges that they were about to lose their Title IV money. I mean, they know it. So I get tired of them saying that they don't because many of them know it. That's where a lot of the money that's fueling these courts is coming from. So in order to get those funds, dad gets the least amount of time. He pays the max in child support. And I'll even give you one better. There is cases where this happens to moms too, especially celebrity moms. The ones that's got, I forget that one country singer right now that is paying like $200,000 a month, Brooks, in child support.
Well, that's what it takes to raise a child.
Yeah, how is that child support? I could live comfortably on that for 2 years, 3 years, But this is just how ridiculous this thing has gotten. Why do they do that? Because that's what fuels it. It's not about the best interest of the child. Mm-hmm. It's about the best interest of their wallets. And that's how it's always been. And guys, we got to keep the awareness going out. We're already 40 minutes into this, and I haven't got to the voicemails yet. So we're going to get into this. Brooks, I'm having fun with you, brother. I appreciate you so much for joining us today. Guys, make sure to get those voicemails in here. We will be back tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. I think tomorrow's show might be with attorney Chris Smith. And we're going to have a new format. It won't be comments. You'll have to get those voicemails in so we can play them on the show. Number 762-441-0281. Again, that's 762-441-0281. Brooks, I'm going to play our first voicemail.
Hey, Eric. This is, and welcome, Dr. McKenzie. This is Charles out of Virginia with the 7 children. You played me on your first broadcast the other day. And just to expand a little bit further, so during the process of being removed from my 7 children for 1,153 days, I am a distinguished veteran. I serve my country proudly, civil servant. And the unique part is I'm going through the process where after, like I mentioned, the 100 reunification sessions, the 80 court appearances, the 143 EMDR therapy sessions, the close to now 300 mindset coaching sessions, working with all the professional experts, with a judge being removed, a gal being removed, a children's therapist being removed, and a parental capacity evaluator being removed, all for unprofessional conduct. And the order that was placed on October 10th of 2019 has been reversed, remanded, appealed, and overturned in every jurisdiction by 3 different judges. My question is, to not physically see your children during this entire process when you've not been proven to be unfit, you've not been proven to be unwilling or unable, and the allegations were all unfounded. I took the unprecedented step to register in my state to raise orphans. So I'm in the process, a week from today actually, I will be certified to raise orphans. So my question is, if you can raise orphans as a fit, willing, and able parent, how can that same state traffic your children and extort you for your 6-figure salary? The mother has been arrested for assault and battery, strangulation, stabbing, and we continue to go to court, and she continues to get these orders of protection against her, and they would just don't do it again, mom, don't do it again, mom. Finally, they got so sick of seeing me, they said I was causing her duress to create these crimes, and not only did they not arrest her or incarcerate her, they just removed my custody altogether and said that I was the problem causing duress. So during the process of having a attorney in the state I reside in, the mom, in the divorce decree, it says she cannot leave the state with the children. She left anyway. So now you have parental kidnapping. She's in another state. I've obtained attorneys in a different state. And I've also had to obtain a civil rights attorney for multiple due process violations. I've said it previously on a voicemail that Reno versus Flores, Meyer versus Nebraska going to 1923, and Queen versus Walcott all protect your fundamental right as a parent. And if you're not unfit, unwilling, or unable, how are these people allowed to create this criminal enterprise, traffic your children, send them back to you as a product, and there's just no accountability whatsoever? I know my 3 minutes is coming to an end. I want to thank all the dads. Dr. McKenzie's worked with me previously. Eric's worked with me previously.
And I think it cut off right there. But I don't know what was going through your head when you was hearing that, Brooks, but I think it was very similar in both of that when he said, how is it that they can put me through these 100 reunification sessions, 80 court appearances and everything, one Title IV money. But then he said, but I can get orphans. Right? Like, how can I get orphans? There's an incentive there too, if I'm not mistaken.
Title 4E.
Yes, where they make money for adopting out these children that have been taken by the state.
And for anybody that doesn't know, anything that has that Title IV in it is coming out of the Social Security Fund. So it's federal money removed from the Social Security Fund and paid to the state to incentivize them to do something. Title 4D as in dog is to break up the family and put someone on child support. Title 4E as in Edward is to break up the family, put children in foster care, adopt them out, and there's a bunch of other ways to get money. So and in nowhere in any of these programs is there an incentivization for keeping the family together and keeping the child in the home. They don't pay you. So if the state got paid to keep the children in the home, there would be all kinds of programs. There would be all kinds, but they don't. They get paid to remove it and break it. And he was asking, how can they do this? And it goes back to one simple thing: immunity. And I believe Jeff Morgan actually talked about Stump v. Sparkman the other day. But immunity basically means, as a judge, I don't have to follow the law. And as an attorney, I also have a level of immunity, and I can break the law. Because when you look at who can punish a judge, who can punish an attorney, right? So if you go to the police and file a criminal complaint against an attorney who broke the law in court, they're going to say, go to the bar. Well, the bar is not a law enforcement agency. So what are they going to do? They're actually going to do nothing, because they're overseeing their friends. They're not going to do anything. And if you file a complaint against a judge in a law enforcement agency, they're going to say, go to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, or whatever it's called in your state. Well, they're not a law enforcement agency. So how are they going to prosecute? Because neither of these places have prosecutorial power. They can't prosecute you. They can't do anything. So what has happened is, within our legal system, because it's written by lawyers for lawyers, we've created a system of self-governance, and they're very proud of it. They brag every time they kill a self-governance bill that we get to govern ourselves because there's no repercussions. So it's one of the only industries in the world where there's no outside body who can come in for criminal acts. We've given them this ability, but they've done it through legislation and everything else. So there literally is none. Now, you can go, and it gets very complicated, but you can go file criminal charges on judges and attorneys. You just have to know how to do it and how to force the law enforcement agencies to take it. But for the most part, this entire system, and I liken it to 1950s, down south, wherever. So, I'm a black man. I come home, my house is on fire, and my wife's been raped, and my kids are dead, right? I go complain. It's against the law. It wasn't legal to lynch black people and kill them and burn their houses. It wasn't. It was illegal. So who do I go complain to? I go complain to the guy who was sitting on the horseback with a sheet on his head and a torch in his hand, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we have right now. The people I complain to are on the horseback with the torch in their hand, laughing all the way, because if I try to take it somewhere else, that's their cousin in the county next. So it's literally, because and people will say, well, it's the law on this. Well, it used to be the law that I could own a black man. Well, now you say, well, so that argument doesn't hold. And it used to be the law that women couldn't vote. And it used to be the law. the law has gotten it wrong so many times. And when they say there's a remedy, there really is not a remedy. There is on paper, but in reality, there isn't one. So in Texas, they'll say, well, you can impeach him. Texas has impeached 2 people ever. So it's not a, and so it is set up to get the public to shut up, sit down. Oh, look, we have all these things that they can do. We have all these laws, but wink, wink, nod, nod. We as the judiciary don't have to follow the laws. Only you do, you stupid sap. We don't. We can violate your rights all day long. And so people say, how does this happen? It happens because you can have a crazy idiot judge who just simply ignores the law, and the crazy idiot judge you're going to forward it to is their friend, and they go have lunch after this person says, no, we're not going to do anything at the appellate level, and they kick it back down. And you wonder, how does this happen? It happens because it's basically a criminal enterprise.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk about these cases a lot. There's 2 cases that comes to mind when you're talking about this particular subject. John Mast, he was accused of domestic violence at a restaurant. She said it happened there at the restaurant. He goes and gets video at the restaurant. So when he goes to court, and he thought he could just go in there and show this and not have an attorney, and he was going to be okay. He goes in the court, says, look, just watch it for yourself and tell me if it happened or not. Judge said, I don't have anything to play with that with today, so we're not going to use it. And so John thought that he was going to be guilty. He got a lesser sentence, and it would be over with quick if he just went ahead and pled guilty. So he pled guilty to domestic violence, even though he didn't do it. And he said he did that because he wanted to hurry up and see his kids quicker. Well, after this, he files for divorce, Brooks, and it now goes from civil to criminal. To family court. When it goes to family court and gets a different judge, that judge says, I want to see that tape. So they watch the tape and see that John was telling the truth. He didn't do any of the things that they said he did. So he was completely exonerated, and which brought her character into question even more. My question is, here is a guy that pled guilty to get the lesser sentence for something that he didn't do. And this judge, all he had to do was play evidence. How do you not allow evidence inside of a court? How is there no consequences for this judge? And that's one of the examples where the immunity comes in. Another one really quick, guys, Jonathan Vanderhagen up in Michigan. There was lots of stuff going on in his case with the mom where he thought she was just not taking care of the kid. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, but he takes her to court and says, Judge, you don't give me custody of my son. I'm afraid my son's going to die. Judge told him, nope, not taking away custody from a mom. It was like 2-3 weeks later, the baby boy died. He was 1.5 years old. He had hydrocephalus, water on the brain, and he wasn't going to his doctors and everything. And this father told him plainly, my child, I'm afraid he's going to die. Judge, help. Here is an example of 2 different men that went to this system in front of these judges that were told to go in front of to get justice, did everything the right way. That's what you legislators really need to hear. These are men that did it the right way. And I know I'm just mentioning John and Jonathan Vanderhagen, but there is thousands, if not millions, that are going on just like this, that they just don't listen to. And because of that immunity, there's deaths. Okay, John's dead. Little Killian, 1.5 years old, he's dead. And this son, his dad, man, grieves every single day. It's been 4 years ago, Brooks, but it's just like the day it happened, the PTSD that came from these courts. And so what do you tell these guys that think that they're going to go through this family law system in front of these judges and get some type of justice? I'm sorry, I don't promote family court anymore. I used to say, get you a good attorney, go and do this. Now, the first thing that comes into my head is I'm like, run. You need to run. And I know there's some cases where some of these guys do okay. But if you hear some of these horror stories, man, I can't promote it. I just can't.
Yeah, and part of this, so I get a lot of people that contact me. So I've presented before I got into this. I've been the keynote speaker at family law bar associations here in Texas. So speaking for an hour or so in front of a bunch of family law attorneys trying to educate them. And this was back before I knew how deep the corruption went on, what is actually best for the child. Because when you say best interest of the child, that's actually what I do. That's my thing. This the state of Texas actually recognizes me as an expert in that area. But I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of attorneys, like personally know them, have met them, have trained them, have spent some kind of time with them, worked on cases with them or whatever. People will ask me, do you know a good attorney? And I tell them, I know three.
I know less than that, Brooks.
I know three. And they'll tell you straight up that you're most likely screwed going into the system. And it just depends on whether you're the favorite parent or not. Is every judge a piece of garbage? No, but I would say probably over 95% of them know exactly what they're doing. I think if you get into some of these really small rural counties where they just happen to be a judge, and it's, like where I live, they only have court out here every other Tuesday. There's,
Yeah.
We don't have a Walmart in my county. I mean, that's how small. So we have a judge that comes in and visits every other Tuesday. So you might get a judge like that who really doesn't know, because it's not a massive industry out here, and they're just, and he's hearing all kinds of cases and he just doesn't
Good
know.
point. Yeah.
But anywhere else that you go, it's an industry. They talk about it in our Texas legislature. They've talked about divorce is a business. Child custody is a business. And if we do this, we will lose money. In Texas, it's $3.8 billion a year just for the family law attorneys. And if you started adding other industries in there, it's like $5.3 billion a year. Texas does a better job at taking those federal Title 4D funds than any other state in the nation. We take twice as much as California, the biggest state in the nation with 10 million more people and more divorces and more fatherless kids. How do we do that? We have learned how to milk it and milk it and milk it, and everyone knows it. So when they say, I'm way out here, I need an attorney, I said, what can I ask them? I say, there's a couple of questions. One, ask them how many judges they've reported for violations, because every attorney who's worked for more than 6 months has seen multiple judges violate the due process, especially in family court. And if they say they haven't reported any, then they're part of the problem, because that's the thing is, if I can be an attorney, oh yeah, it's crooked, it's corrupt, but I can do this. Okay, how many of you reported? Well, none, because it would ruin my career. Okay, then kiss my white behind and bust your feet, because you are part of the problem. You're going to do to me what every other attorney does. You're going to hold my hand and stroke my hair while you rape me. I mean, that's the only difference. I'm still going to get raped. I'm just not going to know it until it's too late. And that's the problem with the whole system. It is literally set up that way. It's monetized the destruction of the family. And if I work within this system for more than a few months, I know exactly what I'm doing.
You brought up a great point too, man. I mean, that goes back, one of my times, if you go into an attorney and they tell you, oh, you got a great case, you're going to get everything you want, that's the second that you need to have some red flags going on. Because a truthful, honest one is going to lay it out no matter how ugly it is. I remember the first time I got told that, Brooks. He's like, oh, you got a great case. I can help you with whatever. I need $10,000 on retainer.
And that was gone within a month.
I didn't do it. I didn't have $10,000.
Yeah.
I was $10,000 in debt.
Yeah, yeah. I tell people, when they tell you what the retainer is, that's about 1/5 to 1/10 of what you're going to end up paying, depending on how long it drags out. So
Yeah.
I know a county judge, a county commissioner in a very wealthy county, outside of Dallas. So, and he'd been in this position for like a couple of decades. So everyone knew him, right? He'd been the county commissioner forever. So when his spouse filed for divorce on him and did these similar things, they actually had to take his case out of the county because he knew all the judges. And so he went out thinking, this is horrible. I don't believe in divorce. Okay, well, let's just, get out of this as best we can. And his attorney, who was a very good friend of his, told him, there's no way in the world you're going to get 50-50. So whatever they offer, if it's decent, I'm going to take it. And he said, what do you mean? Everybody knows me. Everybody knows I haven't abused my family. I've never done anything. She just decided to go date a deacon at the church. And that's a whole nother issue, is the churches have failed. But
100%.
But she's decided to run off and do this thing, and he said, it doesn't matter. You will never get fit. And his friend, the attorney, explained how it works. And he said, to this day, I still can't wrap my head around it. Everyone knows me. I'm an extremely public figure. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
Yet they treated me as if I had done something to my kids, knowing that I hadn't. And now, once he found out about the Title 4D and the industry and the money and everything else, he's like, now I understand. They were going to break it off in me before I even showed up in that courtroom. I mean, it was a game plan. And so it doesn't matter who you are. You know, the hell, people like to talk about the, what is it, the Pirates of the Caribbean guy that, you know,
Funny.
had he not had a recorder running the entire time, and his entire trial be on the media, because even if he had those recordings, if that courtroom were closed, like most of these judges keep those courtrooms closed, he would have lost.
Oh,
Because the
100%.
only reason he didn't lose is because eyes were on. And one of the things that we argue for is cameras and audio in the courtrooms. And these judges vehemently, they'll state you can't have a court with cameras in there. It throws everything off. Well, the Supreme Court of Texas and the Supreme Court of the United States do it, and many other states do it. And when you start breaking down their arguments, you find that they want to be in a dark closet while they rape your children and your family, and they don't want anybody to see. So when they walk out, they can say, yes, this was a very difficult case and it had a lot of hard decisions. No, it didn't. You do the same thing you always do. You just don't want people to know you effing pedophile. And that's pretty much the entire thing. Every argument that they give about why the system works the way that it does, you can take apart in less than 2 minutes, and then you'll see their true colors, because they'll get furious and either start yelling at you or storm out of the room. And it's like, well, no, but if you're right, show me where I'm wrong. Because as a researcher, if you can show me where I'm wrong, I have to change my belief system. That's how research is supposed to work, and that's how my mind works. Show me where I'm wrong. Like I wasn't a believer and a Christian till late in life, until someone showed me where I was wrong, and then I dug into it, and that's actually what flipped me over. And so show me where I'm wrong. But to date, not a single one of these scumbag pedophiles has ever sat down to show me where I'm wrong. They've just gone around and called me a fraud and affidavits and court papers and on media shows and stuff. But I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for them to show me, so I can have some kind of faith in our legislation.
Something you was just talking about to remind me, for anybody that hasn't ever seen The Marriage Story on Netflix, it was very closely related to. Have you seen that, Brooks?
The Marriage Story?
Yeah.
No, but I always recommend Divorce Court for anybody who hadn't seen that one.
Divorce Corp is got your information, statistics. That was one of the best put together documentaries. I talked to Drew last year. He told me he couldn't believe that documentary didn't do better. You know,
Well, and one of the things is, in that show, it's
Yeah.
not a bunch of conservatives defending family values. I mean, you've got what's her name, the one of the most liberal lawyers in the world, the one that sues all the men.
Allred.
Yes. I
Yes.
mean, so you've got people all over the spectrum saying, no, it is absolutely corrupt and absolutely about monetizing the destruction of your children. These are people from all over the spectrum. It's not like a bunch of right-wing nut jobs doing it. It is everybody, and they are just laying it out, saying everyone knows but you. Everyone knows but the parent exactly what's about to play out in this macabre circus. We just do the acting for you, so you think you're getting some kind of justice.
Yeah, man. I mean, so in The Marriage Story is an actual movie, not a documentary, but it starts off with these two parents. It's hit a rocky place in the relationship, and they're not going to be able to make it, but they're still good friends, and they want to come together for the kids. Well, she starts getting around her friend who starts saying, oh, no, girl, I'm telling you, he's going to turn on you. You need to go see an attorney. She said, I don't want to see an attorney. He's a good father. I don't want to keep him from him. I don't want any money. We just don't love each other anymore. But she convinces this woman to go see the attorney. And once the attorney gets there, she's like, how much are you asking for in child support? She's like, I don't want none. Yes, you do, because he's going to come after it for you. And then it just starts going on. How about insurance? How about this? You need to sue him for this and this. So she ends up hiring this attorney, and that attorney even kicks her shoes off and lays beside her like, tell me everything. You know, here's this person that could have done this with her husband, soon to be ex-husband. But once she went to that attorney, it became a battlefield. Now the guy goes and sees an attorney. He does what a lot of these men hear. I could get you anything you want. Oh, I can help you. Here's the retainer. This is what it's going to cost. He milks this guy for every dime. And then there at the very end, on the last court hearing, he comes in and talks to the father and says, you're not going to get what you want. You need to settle.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so accurate. So if you guys haven't seen that,
Well, one of the first things, and almost all of them do it, is they ask you for your financials. Well, why do you need my financials if no discovery's been put in? If I'm just walking in, why do you need to see my financials? You told me it's going to be 5,000. I said, okay, I'll give you 5,000. Why do you need to see my financials? Because you need to know how far you can drag this out, how much you can milk it for.
Yep.
And and you also want to know, do I own or do I rent? Because if I own, now I can mortgage that and you can keep that going. And it is literally, you're asking to say what the trajectory of this case is going to be. Can I drag this out for years, or am I going to bankrupt them in 6 months? But either way, I'm going to bankrupt them. And so attorneys have, what are they, CLUs, I believe,
Yeah.
continuing legal, or CLEs, education. So I've done some of these, right? Again, I've been a presenter for CLEs, but I've also, in some of these all day seminars where they go do these things, I've seen people in my field coach them on how to use psychology to help your client. It's not helping, but basically it, coaching them on how to label the X, a narcissist, a sociopath, a borderline, whatever. Because if you can do that with your client, now you have them hooked in, because you've bought into their story and you're validating it. But now they're fighting this righteous battle against someone who's so mentally ill. And and you see this all over the place. And this is one of the reasons I hate Facebook, is the narcissist this and blah blah. Narcissist has a very specific effing definition, and it makes up a very small percent of the population. And if just off of Facebook all those things were true, you just quadrupled the amount of narcissists in the United States in a day. And so it's not true, but attorneys feed into this. They will literally give out books, Walking on Eggshells, Living with the Borderline.
Because it creates conflict, and conflict creates.
Absolutely. Well, and people on here have talked about, we have an assistant district attorney in Williamson County, the criminal prosecutor for the county, coaching family law attorneys on how to file false TROs, restraining orders, to break the other side. But don't do it in my office, because there's repercussions for making false allegations in a criminal setting, but not in a family court. And that alone should have gotten this attorney disbarred, but we know that the bar doesn't do anything. We're back to that self-governance thing.
Dude, I mean, I know it's Sunday morning, and if you are watching us right now, you're not at church, but I feel like I'm at church. There's some preaching going on here. I'm enjoying this so much, man. And I caught some flack at one point in time, because I think that is a very big problem that he was just talking about, Brooks, is that the narcissist has become that buzzword. And everybody breaking up in a relationship, both of them are going to be narcissists, and they're so worried about labeling the other a narcissist, or it's parental alienation. This is what I'm going through. Stop worrying about the terminology, stop diagnosing, and show the behaviors that are going on, guys. I think many people are hurt in their own cases when they go on there, and they're so set on getting these labels in there. It has become so used. I've seen so much of the alienators. They know all the terminology for alienation. So it's kind of scary in a way. But like I said, if we focus on the behaviors, I think we would be that's a lot safer bet.
Yeah, and so one of the part of it is the industry promotes this stuff. The attorneys use these buzzwords. Most people don't have any clue what they mean. So I know a person. And in their divorce, they were accused of being controlling. They're so controlling and won't allow me to spend money and all this other kind of stuff. Well, these people were broke and doing this Dave Ramsey program to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and they didn't have money, but the spouse would go out drinking and partying and running up credit cards that the other one had paid off behind their back, yet come out and call the spouse controlling for trying to pay off our debt. Called the spouse controlling for asking the other spouse not to drink and drive, because if they got a DWI, it would cost $10,000 at least, and they might lose their teaching license. And so these words are just buzzwords that are thrown around. And abuse. I mean, look at the word abuse. abuse is me doing specific things, either mentally or physically or sexually. I mean, there's a definitive but abuse now is you've hurt my feelings. You don't agree with me.
You
You're
posted a
so
meme
abusive. You're so abusive. What are you talking about? Well, you didn't want to go to dinner, or, I've witnessed crap in courtrooms where no offense, ladies, but it's true, because in a lot of science they do this also. The woman threw objects at the husband's head, cut his head open. That wasn't abuse because he's bigger and could have killed her if he wanted to. But when he took the car keys and said, "You're not going, we're going to talk about this. What the hell is going on?" He was charged with trying to kidnap her because he wouldn't let her leave in the car. So, and that's this narrative, and it's almost always targeted at men. But I work with some women who have been royally screwed over by the system. I've worked with one woman who deployed, right? She was in the military. She got deployed. Her husband was the scumbag and actually took off out of the country with the kids and all. But the judge told her, if you wanted to be a mom, you shouldn't have joined the military. Right. And on the other side, it's usually for the dad. Well, if you deployed, you must have PTSD and be dangerous. So the things on the street corner that would get you celebrated and people clapping and saying, "Thank you so much," in a courtroom, if you were the targeted parent, whether male or female, they will use against you, because they twist and pervert every single thing in order to justify the sickness that they're about to perpetrate on you. And again, it's that thing when at the very beginning we talked about the whataboutisms. I try to justify my sin, my poor behavior. That's all the courts do. They bring in these experts who are going to back them up. And if the expert comes in and does not back them up and refutes them, that person will never, ever, ever again be appointed in that court. They will never be brought in again. And that's why attorneys don't turn these judges in, because they will destroy their career. Everybody in this system is raping your child. They're just smiling at you while they're doing it. And even your own attorney typically is in on that process because he wants that handful of cash too.
It's sad that I have to do this, but Zuckerberg, when he said that, he meant metaphorically.
Yes. Metaphorically, yes.
Yes.
And metaphorically, buy more ammo. People say, "What can I do?" I say, "Buy more ammo." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Go deer hunting. It'll relax you."
That's what I do. I did it this morning. And it's crazy. I sat out there for 3 hours, Brooks, didn't see a thing. And then as I was walking out my back door earlier, here come one running across while I don't have my gun. But that's how it goes. But guys, I promise we're going to get to your voicemails. I'm at least going to take 2 more. I'm sorry. I'm having fun with this. And I thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. I'm enjoying it. If you want to call and leave us a voicemail, I've gotten a couple since we've been on here. 762-441-0281. Again, that's 762-441-0281. And please send those in. We want to hear from you guys. Here is our next caller.
Hey, this is Matt. I'm calling from South Louisiana. As soon as my ex got pregnant, she isolated me, and she's a little over a year old now, and she finally just come around after fighting in court since she was born, basically. Then just out of the blue one day, she was like, "Oh, well, I want you to be in her life." And we've been doing co-parenting pretty good for the past 2 months. My question here is, should I try to go to mediation with her? She says she doesn't even need to do that, but it just seems like she doesn't want to do that now because she doesn't want to have to bring her to me on the weekend. She just wants to do it on her own schedule. I'm thinking that's what that is. I don't want to put a stick in a hornet's nest and do all that while we're getting along. I'm just trying to figure out really what to do here because it seems like we're getting along pretty good, but she can change at any moment. I appreciate it.
Hey, brother. I'm not telling you to back down, but I would say if you got an ex that is wanting to sit down and communicate with you, I would do it. Because once you go to the court, they try to do it for you. And then that's when the bills start racking up. It seems like there might be some issues on your side that you might not necessarily agree with. What I would suggest, guys, is you're two people that once loved each other. Maybe you didn't, but you had a child. Okay, most of the people, they loved each other. You hit somewhere where you don't want to be together anymore. And that conflict is when we get in here and we start battling over the house, the kids, when they're going to get them in this. And it's very hard to overcome those feelings. We've been through it. Okay. As time goes by, some of that can decrease, especially if you don't go into family court. Once you go into family court, it's going to increase because they're not there for you to pay compliment to each other. They want you to fight. They want the conflict to go on because that creates more billable hours. If you can talk to your ex and say, look, even without mediation, can we sit down? We got here, enough to make a child and bring a child into this world. Can we sit down and come up with a plan to co-parent? And if we can agree, we'll just get the papers signed. That would be best case scenario. I know there's a bunch of people out there saying right now, Brooks, yeah, right. That's not going to happen with my ex, but try it. You never know. In some of these cases, I've had several of these guys come to me. Oh, my ex, she would never do that. And they end up doing it. But it was all it's going to be give and take. They want their side. You want your side. So I usually say, start it off like, hey, could we meet up somewhere to talk about this? You can pick the place. You can pick the day. You can even pick the time as long as I am off work. And that shows them you're giving them a little bit of control in the situation. But I'm wanting to do this. You're both somewhat making a compromise. I know that sounds like all rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes it works. But that would be my first thought on that. If she is kind of stuck on not wanting to bring the kid to you, if that's the only issue right now, I wouldn't hire attorneys and all that for it. That's just my own 2 cents. What about you, Brooks?
Well, one, I'm glad I looked in the comments because someone is telling me where I can find a hot girl 69 triple X fund. So I'm
Really?
super excited about that.
Oh,
I have to go check that out in a little while. I just let them know I don't have any money, so I can't pay for it anymore. So I have known some, and again, it's usually mothers who have come around and realize that their child actually needs that. There we go. Fine. Yeah. They need that relationship. So yes, it does happen because a lot of times. So when we talk about how ignorant the attorneys and the judges are, a lot of parents don't know this crap. Well, no, a child always needs to be with their mother. Actually, research shows that after school age, children do better when raised by a single father than they do by a single mother. Ouch, boom. Now I just started a bunch of stuff, but that's what the research shows. And that if you had to pick a parent and everything was equal, the one with the penis actually does a better job raising the child because a child's needs shift from the time they're a toddler to their school age. Ooh, there's going to be people hating on me for that one, but that's just what the research shows. So a lot of people don't know. As far as never get an attorney involved, I would say slow roll it. Take what you can right now. And if those lines of don't push it, communication open, then address it, but slow roll it till you get a feel and sit down together and don't write something and give it to her. Sit down and figure it out and say, does this work for you? It works for me. But you run the risk of walking into that courtroom and her showing up with an attorney or her taking that and saying, well, I'm going to run this by my attorney. And now you've just reopened because that attorney's job is not to say, yeah, this looks great for your child. That attorney's job is to say, you know what he's trying to do? He's trying to take your kid. He's coming for him. He's just trying to be nice to you. He's going to come and take little Billy and you'll never see Billy again. We've got to get and that is what attorneys do. And my personal thing, my wife and I sat down and literally wrote out the terms of her leaving. And within 4 hours after giving it to her attorney, she called me every name in the book, screaming and yelling at me about how I was trying to do all this stuff. And I'm like, this was literally the thing that she came up with. I was typing it in while we were talking. And then she took the thing she came up with to her attorney. And then all of a sudden I was trying to destroy her. And so an attorney's job is to destroy you. And so I would just slow roll it. And if things work out over time, maybe here, hey, if you've got to go there, I can babysit for you. You don't have to take them over to your sisters and start doing that. Make it the norm before you try to make it formalized, if that makes sense. Because if I'm comfortable with this situation, I'm more likely to write it on paper.
I'm with you there,
And
brother.
this is not legal advice because I'm not a lawyer and I'm stupid and I don't know anything.
No, we're just friends connected because of this same common issue on here talking. And yeah, man, with that said, guys, we're getting on to our next voicemail. This will be the last one for today. If we didn't get to yours today, we will be. I got them saved in here right now. 762-441-0281. Here is our next caller.
I'm Mike. I'm from Ohio. My case is in West Virginia. I've been battling the court system for almost 3 years. I was an alienated parent for 12 years. My daughter reached out to me 2 years ago, and we talked, and her mom and her grandmother found out that we were talking, and blocked me, started telling her really, really bad things about me, stuff that isn't true. I was able to get visitation with her, in which every visitation was sabotaged. They went as far as sending her with pepper spray to spray me. She's 12. I mean, what is a 12-year-old need pepper spray on a visit with their father for? It's been 2 years in court now, and there hasn't been any sort of progress. I mean, I thought there was progress. We would talk. We would have fun on the visit. She would be smiling, laughing. And then when we go back to court, there's all sorts of different allegations. I've even had CPS called on me a few times saying that I'm mentally, physically, verbally, and emotionally abusing my child, which has all been disproven. And Robert Garza knows me in my case. We've talked multiple times. It's stressful. It's frustrating. I mean, I was kept away from my child for almost 12 years, and kept in the dark about where she was, where she lived. It's frustrating, and I finally got visitation now just to be further alienated. But I hope you share this with people, man. It's rough, and any feedback would be great. Thanks.
Hey, man, I appreciate you calling in. I mean, there was a lot of information going on there, so I'm trying to, comprehend everything that the gentleman was saying. But from what it sounded like, he was saying he had been alienated for quite some time. So his child is older. And we hear that there's people that's been, doing this father's rights thing for decades, that have children that they still haven't talked to. What's that like in your experience, Brooks, with these children that have been going through this for such a long time, and then there finally starts to be some communication?
So one of the things, and this is just because of what I do. So I used to have an uncle. He's dead now, and he was always dirt poor. I mean, he's country, had a used tire shop kind of guy, and that's what he always did. But he could listen to a car drive down the road and tell you what was wrong with it. It was crazy. But he wasn't educated, but he'd be like, oh, the serpentine belt and the this and the widget and the blah, blah. And I mean, he just knew, and he could flip it up, and, it was kind of self-taught. I'm not self-taught, but one of the things that I hear a lot is like, well, just stick it out when they're 18, they'll come find you.
Mm-hmm.
I know what happens to that child's brain. So yeah, that's great. Well, no, it's not, because that child is going to be so damaged. And so, a buddy of mine, Rustin, he's been doing this for 17 and a half years.
Yeah.
Right. And
has it been that long?
Yeah. And so, and other people will say, I just got back to, why do they act this? They act this way because they literally have brain damage from having that relationship severed for I mean, they literally physically changes the shape of the brain. That is brain damage because it changes it in a negative way. And so this is common. There are men, mostly men, some women, who don't see their kids for years because a court has decided, well, you're on the hook for child support. That's my only job. I don't care. You know, I've seen judges scream at a parent, basically telling them how much they hate him the first day they ever met with him. You know, and everything after that is based on that. And so, you know, what can you do? Buy more ammo, go deer hunting. But it's that's the thing is, within the system we have, there is almost nothing you can do. That's why the system must be broken, because you can do all the right on paper things and they can still simply effing ignore you because it's just your kid. It's not a big deal. They'll get over it. No, they won't. And that's the thing is, you have to, like here in Texas, we've got people doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We've got federal removals going on. We've got the Saldanas who figured out how to bring criminal charges within the courtroom to the bailiff, who's a law enforcement officer on the opposing counsel for aggravated perjury. And now when the judge tells you can't do that, well, now I'm going to file official oppression with your bailiff on you because you can't tell me not to file my. I mean, we're making a circus out of it using their own rules, because when you play by their rules, you are doomed to fail unless, you know, the judge dies and you happen to get a new one. I'm not saying kill the judge, you know, I'm saying maybe they just drop off the face of the map. But that's the thing. The game is set, it's rigged. It's like going into a 3-card Monty game and expecting to win because you just saw the guy over here wearing $100. Well, the guy over here is his partner. You know, they're just, and it is horrible, and it's disgusting. It's child abuse, and it's never spoken about, because about half our population has done this to their spouse, and everybody else doesn't want to offend the judges and attorneys because, ooh, they're so honorable. No, they're not. They're scumbags. They're scumbag pieces of garbage. Ask them how many times they filed complaints. Ask them first, how many times have you seen violations of due process? Oh, all the time. Yeah. How many complaints have you filed? Well, no, I've never done that. Well, then get out of my face, scumbag, because you are feeding off the destruction of children. And to me, you're no different than an effing pedophile. So I, you know, theoretically put you down just like I would a dog.
I tell you, I got a question about something that you just said, but so did somebody in the audience. I think it was good to bring this up. Kim Kirchhofer, I hope I'm saying that right, said, does that mean a child that had a father who abandoned him for his whole life, he has brain damage also?
Yeah. So this is where it gets into a lot of the sciencey stuff, right?
Yeah.
All right. So there's research that shows a child who goes through divorce suffers more than a child whose parent dies. So it's better for a child in most cases for the parent to literally die than the child to go through divorce. And so the question, it depends, how old were they? So children don't even realize who you are until about 6 months of age. Once you walk out of the room, they don't have object permanence, meaning they don't understand things exist outside of their visual system. So when you're a mom or a dad and you walk out of the room and your child's 4 months old, they don't even know you exist anymore because their brain doesn't have that capacity. When you walk back in, they go, ah, because all of a sudden you're there, and they didn't, you know, they don't have a continuing thing. So, you know, if a father who's a scumbag and bailed on his kid at birth, is there going to be deficits? Yes. Are those deficits going to be the same as a child who was removed from the father after toddlerhood and already created that relationship? No. So, you know, it depends on timing, how much. So, you know, yes, but it's kind of, think of it as a food group. I need fruits, vegetables, meats, blah, blah, blah. If I take one of those things completely out, all right, that's, you know, I can still survive. It's not probably the best. I need a rounded diet or whatever. And, you know, but the other one is taking like 3 of the 4 food groups out. And so it just depends on how old the child was and stuff like that, because men and women are different. I don't know if you've noticed the difference. There's a penis and a vagina, so that's number one. Two, I can't get pregnant or breastfeed. There's all, but our brains actually function differently. They react differently to the same neurochemicals. When a man and woman have sex, a woman's brain responds to oxytocin, which is the same thing that's expressed in the brain when they breastfeed. So a lot of women, when they breastfeed, when they first start, they report an overwhelming sense of euphoria. And that's kind of there to make you want to breastfeed because your nipples are going to be getting hurt pretty soon. But it gets you high, it gets you addicted to the breastfeeding, which is one of the biggest bonding things to a child. So that's how a woman's brain reacts when a man and woman have sex. Men have oxytocin, but it doesn't react to oxytocin. It reacts to vasopressin. A woman has vasopressin. So our brains, and so the vasopressin, but both of those create bonding. So that's whenever you have sex with anybody you're not married to, you're actually creating an emotional bond that is meant for a purpose that you're not honoring with marriage, but that's a whole nother thing. So our brains are different. Women are the predominant caregivers and should be the predominant caregivers for the first few years of life because that's how your brain works. Men actually start taking over that role at about 4 or 5 years of age because a child now goes from being completely reliant on somebody else to make those decisions, nurture, cuddle, all that kind of stuff, because a woman's brain's more built for that, to starting to be more independent, venture out and look at things and try to figure out the world. And that's where a father's brain comes in. And so we know that we operate very differently. So anytime you don't have one of those inputs, so say my wife dies in childbirth, would my child be okay? Yeah, but would they be so much better if they had had a mother? Absolutely. And so when you're saying, well, does this, does that? Yes, always it does. It just depends on so many different things, timing, age, relationship, and things like that. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No. That was so beautifully put, man. I mean, I love that. I have really enjoyed you doing this. We're gonna have to get you back in for sure, Brooks, because I'm sure we're at an hour and a half now, and I feel like we're just getting started. There's so much that you can talk about with this. So I'm gonna give Brooks one last question, and guys, like I said, get those emails in because we'll be doing this or voicemails. But Brooks, when we was talking about the child and waiting until they're 18 and everything, do you think there's so many of these parents that are thinking, oh, when they turn 18, they're going to run to me and I'm going to get to tell them my side of the story and they're going to listen to me. They really think that moment's coming where they're just going to be able to tell it and it's done. And then they're just going to flip on that other parent. You talk about how that brain changes. Is that child at that point really going to be able, I'm guessing, I don't know if every case is different, but are they really going to be able to understand or listen to what the rejected parent is trying to tell them?
So I've had this discussion with someone that I know, you know him too, many times. So what we know from the body of research is that abused and neglected children, so I'm not talking like, one time someone hit a kid, broke their arm, over time, it does more damage than that one PTSD event. All right. So abused and neglected children are about half their age emotionally that they are biologically. And what that means is, so if I'm 13 and I've grown up in an abusive or neglectful household, I might be 13, I might be great at sports, I might be awesome at math, I might be on the honors roll, but emotionally, when things hit the fan, when things get difficult, when I get either really excited or really sad or overwhelmed, I'm about 7 or 8 emotionally. So, and it's really hard for people to understand, well, they're so good at this and they're so good at that. And yeah, but those are things that don't have to do with emotion. And you'll find that a lot of these kids are about half their age. And so it's hard for people to wrap their head around that, but you can see it if you I can see it all the time. So, I work with families and stuff, and you watch it and you watch this kid hit a difficult time or a really exciting time and make piss poor decisions because their brain is lagging in the emotional realm. So it basically shuts off that frontal lobe. So they're not sitting back and saying, okay, I'm sad. Why am I sad? Let's process this and work through it. Because most adults can't even do that nowadays. They react like a much younger child. And so when this 18-year-old shows up, all that stress, all that stuff, all those years, a lot of these kids are suicidal, they don't they're not able to emotionally step into that hot emotional mess that would be reuniting with my parent. I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult. And so they'll often make decisions like, well, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm 18. You can't tell me what to do. I'm going to join the military. That's probably one of the safer places. But so they make horrible decisions, and the parents will, well, no, they're fine, they're great. No, they're not. Emotionally, they are broken, and they're about half their age. So would you expect a 9 or 10-year-old to have this discussion with you? Well, no. Well, then think of your child as a 9 or 10-year-old emotionally. When they start making these irrational, and you can't understand why, when you frame it in that, it makes sense, because that emotional system is dependent upon the input from parents. And if all you've had is a broken, twisted relationship or being without and all that, that emotional system is stunted. So yeah, go off to college, which is a horrible idea, because you're going to be have so many challenges and need to make good decisions, but you're not, because you're really a 10-year-old who's super excited or super upset, and you're going to make 10-year-old decisions. And so when they talk about this, that most 18-year-olds are not going to be emotionally capable of having that. They might reach out, and you need to take it slow, and you need to meet them where they're at, just like I would meet a 10-year-old where they're at. I'm not going to treat a 10-year-old like an 18-year-old. So when I'm having this discussion, I'm not going to talk to you like a 10-year-old, but I'm going to expect you need me to support you like a 10-year-old, not get frustrated, why can't you see that? Because you're 10 in your brain. And if I can look at you that way, I can say, okay, buddy, that's fine. You can be mad at me. And then you're more likely to call me back and say, well, I don't know why I was mad. And I can help you process that, but if well, why are you mad at me? She's the bitch that did this. Sorry.
No, you're good.
She's the blah, 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 because they're not going to get that, because they aren't able to get that. So you have to basically re-raise their brain to catch up with their biological age. I mean, it's convoluted sounding, but I hope I was able to make sense of it.
Nah, brother, you knocked it out of the park. Like I said, I have enjoyed this so much. Brooks, do you have anywhere that you do these speakings normally, or somewhere that anybody that was listening today can keep up with what you're doing?
I go wherever they'll have me. So, sometimes it's the Austin area, Collin County area. I stay in Texas because I'm trying to pressure political groups to pressure their legislators, because wherever I go and speak, almost no one has ever heard any of this.
Right.
They talk about the porn in the schools, expanding mental health care, and transgender, cutting penises off, and all this other kind of stuff. The shootings, Uvalde shootings, right? Where do our shooters come from? Broken homes, right? They're here in Texas. There's this massive push to put all the kids on meds and expand mental health care in the schools, which is an idiotic idea, because there's so many broken kids. Where do the broken kids come from? Broken homes. And so pretty much everything in our state that they're trying to fight, the root cause is the destruction of the nuclear family, which is monetized by our state. So our state is literally creating the problems that they turn around and whine about. So I go speak all over our state. And my whole goal is to get other people to talk about this, to contact their legislators and say, what are you doing to fix this? And by the way, we need to get rid of immunity, because we need to start locking some of these POSs up, and that doesn't mean point of sale. But yeah, so I mean, I post it on my Facebook page when I have a thing, and it's just kind of, I just go and do wherever God opens the door, I go. And that's kind of it, because I for the past year I've been begging for places to let me come speak, and now I'm not famous, but enough people have seen me speak that now I'm getting invited places. And they often do it to have me come in and blow up their judges who claim to be, these great people with best interests of the child. And they'll come in and light our judges on fire because we just found out what they were doing. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do this and get some marshmallows.
Well, you got a platform and friend here, man, because I'm looking forward to getting another conversation in here. And I'd probably keep going if I didn't have to pee. I'm just going to be honest with you, I'm about to bust.
See, if you just finish your drink.
I got Topo Chico in here, and
it's like taking a road. It's like taking a road trip, though. Nobody can see below your waist.
Yeah, so little TMI for you guys, but Get those voicemails in. You're going to hear me say it again. 762-441-0281. 762-441-0281. I am appreciating hearing from you guys. It's good to connect with the audience. And we learn stuff too when we hear from you guys. So Brooks, thank you so much. I'm glad you finally got to come on the show. And thank you so much for your hard work and fighting this battle, man. We need more people like you, brother.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate what you do, and everybody else out there who, I usually don't talk about my story, but I will share it. So I am in this because I've gone through it, and I stay active because if I don't, I go into a dark place where I start thinking about doing stuff, you know. And
Yep.
so there was a time where I literally didn't get out of bed for 6 months, and I would be proud of myself if I would brush my teeth once a week and take a shower once every couple of weeks. So, you know, people look like, oh, you're fighting this battle, but I've lived that thing where I would wake up every day and try to find a reason not to put a bullet in my head.
I've been there.
And so,
Yeah.
I just want people to know that it's because there's going to be people watch this who are in that place.
Yeah.
And people are going to criticize you for you're not doing enough, you're not fighting more, da da da. And some days it was all I could do to stay alive, let alone anything else. And so I just want people to know that this is very common. It doesn't make you a bad person. And some days I just had to take it one day at a time. I'm not going to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And that's the only thing that got me through the day. And so this is all I do now. People ask me, where do you work? What do you do? I don't. This is all I do because my goal is to destroy this system and start getting these pieces of crap locked up in jail, prosecuted, disbarred, removed. My entire goal is to destroy the family law industry in the state of Texas, and I'm very open about it. And I don't approach it as Jesus speaking to the prostitute. I approach it as Jesus flipping tables and pulling out a whip because that's my personality.
You know, and I mean, you're absolutely right. I think back when I first started experiencing this alienation, and I didn't know what alienation was. I didn't know what gaslighting was. I didn't know what any of this was, and it was hitting me, and I responded to it. I fell for gaslighting. You know, you see somebody that makes these accusations, you want to be like, you stupid. You know, like what are you saying? You know, this is a lie, but it just drove me insane. And then you go to these attorneys and you go to the system and you feel like there's no relief there. And I can't tell you how many mornings, Brooks, I did have custody of 2 of my daughters that I had to make sure they were taken care of. That is the only reason my feet got out of bed every morning. I wanted to give up so bad, but I had to be there for them. And I think we've all been through those low moments, guys. We really have. And there's a lot of emotions, even with us talking about this here right now. We need to hear more men talking about it. It's okay what you're going through. And the more that you can talk to other people about going through this, the better it is. That's what we're trying to do here, is foster an environment so that we can get our guys speaking so that the world can hear what you're saying. Because that's a bad place to be, but there is better days. I promise you there is better days for you too, Brooks. Dude, the fact that you're in here and you're doing this and you're fighting your own battles, the only thing I would ask for you and advocates like Jeff, Robert, and all these guys, make sure you're taking care of yourself and taking breaks, man, because if this is all you consume, oh my God, it did a number on me. It really did a big number. I'm just now coming back on the podcast after several months. I had to just get away from it. This is a very serious subject matter we're talking about here, guys. So while I enjoyed this conversation, keep that in mind. You see these broadcasts, like, share, subscribe. It's not about making a YouTube or a podcast show. It's about making sure that the people that need to hear this are getting it, because there's not many places that they're going to hear what we're talking about. So, like I said, though, I gotta pee even more now. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to get back in touch with you a little bit later on because I love you, brother. I gotta get you back on. But guys, thank you so much for coming, Brooks. It was a pleasure, my man.
Thank you, brother.
All right, man. Hey everybody, Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. Like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also Super Chats, patreon.com/Dad Talk Today, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next